Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Chase and Thoughts with Chase. I was about to say the Generated Podcast because that was the old name of this podcast before I turned it into Chase and Thoughts with Chase. But no, this is Chase and Thoughts with Chase. This is no longer that. So today I'm going to be talking about the ACT, and if that seems random and left field, that's because it was. Because how I came upon this topic was I was desperately glancing around the last time I recorded one of these episodes for a topic to talk about because I hadn't thought of one yet. And I looked at my ACT practice book that I literally never touched. And I thought, you know what? Let's just look up some facts about the ACT, present some funny stuff, as well as some study tips that I have personally, and call that an episode. So, yeah, that's literally the whole episode that I have planned. And I actually have notes on this one because, as I said, this is one I had to research. So, let's just get straight into the facts. So, something I should note is I'm not going to be talking a lot about the SAT in this video. It's going to mostly focus on the ACT. So, the first thing you might wonder is, well, when was the ACT first introduced? The ACT was created back in 1959 and is the younger of the two standardized testing, since the SAT was created all the way back in 1926. And why it took a company 33 years to think, there's a bit of a monopoly on this. Hey, I know, I should create a rival test to the SAT. I have no idea. The ACT is separated into 4 primary sections and then a 5th optional one. The 4 ones that everyone has to take is English, math, reading, and science. And if I have to explain what English, math, reading, and science are, then you're probably not old enough to be watching this video. Either that or you genuinely don't know, in which case I might go into further delving into each of these 4 topics at a later time in the podcast. So, yeah. Each of the 4 sections, English, math, reading, and science, are graded 1 through 36. 1 obviously being the worst score you can get, and then 36 being the best score you can get. And then your composite score, which for those of you who are old enough to understand the ACT but not old enough to quite understand, your composite score is the main thing that most colleges look at, and your composite score is the average between each of those 4 sections. So each of the 4 sections matter equally. Just another thing that I do know is that you are allowed to use calculators in the math section. They're not barbaric monsters, but you're not presented any of the formulas either. So you have to memorize the formulas and how to do them. So it's not carried for you. Also, I do remember that the calculators specifically have to be approved by school administration, maybe someone on the ACT organization, before you're actually allowed to take that specific calculator in. Because I know there's specific kinds of calculators that are prohibited. And also, obviously, you're not allowed to bring a phone in. And if you were to use your phone calculator for the ACT test, first off, that's in a technical sense cheating. But second off, I would question why the heck you're doing that, since most basic phone calculators are, like the ones Apple has built in, are worse than most graphing calculators. So I don't really understand what you're trying to do there. And also, here's an actual genuine tip for the ACT. I did not know this going into it when I took the test, but this is something you guys all get to know. In the math section specifically as well, geometry is a pretty big focus, and you're going to see anywhere between 35 to 45% of the questions on the test being geometry specifically, depending on what iteration of the test you get. But yeah, a lot of the questions on the math section on the ACT are going to be geometry based. So if you struggle with geometry and you're taking the ACT this year, that is one actual tip I have, is to study up on that. the ACT is not like a write in or fill out answers. All the stuff on the ACTs are multiple choice. And the way this works is when you walk in test day, they'll give you like the paper that has all the questions, and then they have a separate paper where you're supposed to fill in what your answer is. Now, because it's multiple choice, there is a theoretical possibility that you could get a perfect score just by guessing. But before I go and suggest that as a genuine strategy, let's take a look at the odds of that. Some of the questions in the ACT have 4 answers and some of them have 5. For the sake of doing probability simply, we're gonna assume there's 4 questions on every one of the questions in the ACT. So that would be A, B, C, and D. Now, that means you have a 1 in 4 chance of being right, or a 25% chance for getting any one question right, which honestly is not terrible odds. The odds aren't in your favor, but they're not terrible either. Now, the ACT has a total of 215 questions, counting all the sections in it. So, all we need to do is to do some simple math, and by simple math, I mean multiply 0.25 times itself 215 times, which I have to admit, I really struggled a lot when I was trying to look up the answer for this for a while, and then I remembered, wait a minute, exponents exist. I can just multiply 0.25 to the power of 215 and not waste all this time. So yeah, if you ever consider going into content creation, kids, remember, you will still use math, so please study in school. Anyway, the odds of getting a perfect 36 by simply guessing, assuming that all the questions have 4 choices, are 3.606632 e to the negative 130. And for those of you who do not understand what scientific notation is, because that answer is in scientific notation, just basically imagine a 3.6 with 130 zeros and point in front of the 3, and then put that as a percentage. That is the chance you have of perfectly guessing every single question right if you guessed randomly. I literally do not have a proper analogy to tell you guys how low those odds are. The best I have literally is like any one atom being the first atom in the universe that caused the freaking Big Bang. And even then, I don't really want to use that as an analogy, because then I have to go super deep into thermonuclear physics and astrophysics and relativity, and I don't really want to do that for the sake of making a single metaphor. So, yeah, I don't have one. That is my final legal statement. Now, assuming that all the questions have 5 answers, A, B, C, D, and E, which reduces your chances to 20% per question, your odds are looking more like 5.265615 e to the negative 151. And yes, I did both of these on a calculator. I did not look up these answers other than the fact I typed in 0.2 to the power of 250. That's how I got these numbers. Which, as I stated, if you don't understand scientific notation, that is rounding up. That is a 5.3 with 151 zeros in front of the 5. And then put that as a percentage. I'm going to give you this advice. If you think for a second that you can get even a decently good grade by guessing throughout the entire ACT, think again. Because the odds are so incredibly stacked against your favor that I bet if you had computers taking the tests billions of times per day, for all of eternity, like until the actual heat death of the universe, I do not think there would be a perfect score among any of them. So, with that, obviously, I'm not saying you shouldn't guess at all. One of the things about the ACT is that there's very tight time constraints with it. And generally speaking, you shouldn't spend more than a minute on any one of the questions. So if you're at the end of the test and you have like 2 questions you genuinely do not know the answer to, then just guess on those 2 questions, because you have a much better 6%, 6.25% chance rather than, the freaking insane odds of guessing through the entire thing. So you can use guessing as a way to wrap up questions you genuinely don't know the answer to, but don't use it as your primary strategy going into the ACT. I'm thinking you guessed this already, but those are the guess that guessing is not a good strategy on the ACT, but I also was more curious about the specific numbers of probability. So I did that entire section. I've been talking mainly about the 4 sections, but what's the optional 5th section, the essay? I never took this personally, so I don't have any personal experience with it. So the way that the essay section works is it gives you a passage to read that addresses an issue, and then you're supposed to write your own personal opinion on the issue after the essay gives you the different perspectives. Now, what I was curious about is how the heck do you grade an essay? Because an essay's effectiveness is at least partially subjective to whoever's grading it. So how do you ensure that regardless of who's grading it, you get as consistent and as accurate of a grading experience as possible? They do this by grading them via the 6-point holistic rubric. The 6-point holistic rubric grades the following aspects in the essay, and I'm just going to turn on my screen for a second and pull up the folder. I should have printed this out, but I didn't. I'm sorry. So I'm just looking at the highest score. So what they look for is how it clearly and you address whatever task you're looking at and how you respond to all aspects of the task. How thoughtfully and in depth you explore the issues, how coherently it's organized, which includes grammar with ideas supported by apt reasoning and well-chosen examples, and it also demonstrates smooth, coherent transitions, has an effective, fluent style marked by clear and precise use of language and syntactic variety, which I think means that you're actually thinking about what words to say, and if you have to mention a word that means the same thing multiple times, you're not using the same word. You're using a different word, which is unique yet also fits and flows well with the rest of your essay. And then obviously it has to be free, and obviously the less errors in mechanics, usage, and sentence structure you can get, the better. And they grade this via 1 to 6. So now comes the point of the podcast episode where I come and talk about my personal experience with the ACT. So I don't specifically remember what day of the year it was, but I'll give you some insight. So I walked into my school district and they had dedicated a specific part of the classrooms specifically to doing the ACT. But the way it works is you sit down, the teacher will hand you out like the test for that section, and then your answer key, not the answer key, no, like your answer sheet, not the answer key. Handing out the answer key would give you all the answers to the quiz, thereby making the entire test obsolete. They do not hand you the answer key. That would be really, really stupid if a teacher accidentally did that. I can't remember what they started with. They think they started with English, but I could be wrong. But they start with one of the sections. They start a timer. You fill in your answers. The teacher, I think, generally lets you know when you have like 5 minutes or 1 minute left. And then once that's done, you turn in, give them back the test thingy. And then they go out and do the next section. And then for us at least, after the second section, They gave us like a 15-minute break to kind of refresh our heads, which I genuinely liked because it gave me time to breathe. And then we went in and did the other 2 sections, and then I think there was extra time for the people who took the essay section, but I didn't. And also during the math section, I think you were allowed to bring in your own calculator. I could be wrong about this. I think they said you were allowed to bring in your own calculator, but it had to be approved by the district beforehand on the math section. But they had to take a look at it and make sure it wasn't like rigged or anything. And then comes the part where I tell you what tips I have for studying, which I didn't look up much of this, but I am begging you to not follow my example. Because my example, if you were to follow my example, you would not have studied for the ACT at all and then just walked in there blind to the entire thing and said, you know what, I'm going to use my general knowledge and try my best. Because that's what I did during the ACT. And I got a 26, which is not a bad score at all. I think the average is like a 20. So really, that's not a bad score at all. The part I regret is if I studied, I could have easily gotten a 30 or even higher on my composite if I had simply done some simple studying. And so that's my beckoning to you, is juniors of this year, if you're watching this video, please do some studying for the ACT. Even if you think you're smart, even if you think you can get a good score without it, studying will most likely help you get a better score for it. And also, this is very important, make sure you get the proper amount of sleep 2 days before the at minimum, the last 2 nights before the test. Now, normally, I would say, oh, you just get good night's sleep before the night before the test. But if you get a bad night's sleep within the last 48 hours, because your body circadian rhythm runs on a 48-hour cycle, you're still going to be tired and not running optimally. So my thing is, don't plan like any late night parties 2 days before the ACT. Make sure that you get a good night's sleep on both of those nights so that your mind is calm, it's awake for the entire test, and you're at your best. Those are my actual tips to those taking the ACT. I got into a little bit of a serious ramble there, but yes, if there's anything you take away from this episode, that's what you should take away, is to use the resources you have to study so that you can do your best on the ACT. Because trust me, this is one of the things that matters most to colleges. And yes, there are some colleges which are open enrollment and stuff, but if you want to get into a good college for a specific niche, you're probably going to need a decent ACT score in order to even be considered. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode. Next week, I actually have the topic for next week. So next week, let me go fetch the book real quick. My branch president gave me this book right here. It's a bird book, and I was supposed to go bird watching. So I admit I haven't been bird watching much, but I'll be doing that for the next 7 days, and then I will come back and report on what I learned from my bird watching, my experiences bird watching, as well as a couple of bird species I found in the book that I really like, because I'm just going to start reading this book. And all of this is, again, a continuation from last Friday's thing where I deleted YouTube off my phone to prevent doom scrolling, to kill my doom scrolling habit so that I can focus more on content and my art and other things I like to do rather than just spend 3 hours scrolling on YouTube Shorts. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next week.